Hi friends, Andy Miller here. I know some of you don't know me. I'm responding to Captain Bethany Yoakum's question, and it's great to, just to think of you guys for a minute is good for me. Antoine and Bethany, hope you're doing well. Johnson City, I believe. And I'm so glad to hear this question from the Corps Cadet that is in your Corps. And I just want to say, like, if that person is watching this, man, I am just so impressed, delighted that we have Corps Cadets who are asking these type of questions and that there are officers who are thinking through this. I thought that in response to what Bethany was asking, that the best thing for me, easiest way for me to respond, which is to make a quick video here. I have a PowerPoint, maybe I can send to Bethany and Antoine as well. And we can follow up in some other way. Maybe this isn't a helpful way, but I thought this might be an easy way for me. I just have a few minutes before I have to go somewhere else, but I thought I could get a quick response in this way. So thank you so much. This gives me a great opportunity to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and that's heaven. There was an old lady who was a great church pastor of another denomination outside of Salvation Army, and she had this bumper sticker that I loved. It said, "Just imagine heaven." And I love that idea. Like, just imagine. Most of the time, like this song, "I Can Only Imagine," kind of, it says like, okay, all you can do is really imagine, and it makes me feel like you can't. It just kind of feel like this spacey, kind of weird, I call it like a Force ghost type of view of heaven, where, like from Star Wars, you have a Force ghost like Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm showing I'm a Star Wars fan here, but you have a Force ghost, and it's just kind of like there, but can't really touch them. I mean, it's just a little funny. So there's a basic understanding. I'm going to use an illustration to get to this, to think about how we think of eternal realities. So, like, I used to live in oh man, that might get too far away. I used to live in a place, I'm going to scoot this camera up here. Oh, hopefully I can get this going. Oh, there we go. Oh man, too close. I'm definitely like 2 months overdue for a haircut. I used to live in a place called Lawrenceville, Georgia, and it's kind of a long word to say, and maybe some of you have this. So, like, you have long words. I don't know if you do this with Johnson City. You may call it like J City, J Town, or something like that. Like, I don't know if you call the Yoakums Captain Y. I don't know. That's an easy name to say. But Lawrenceville, every now, oh man, my pen, my marker isn't working very well. All right, Lawrenceville. I would sometimes write Elville, right? As a shorthand. Or another way of thinking of it is like, if you have like texting language like JK or LOL, like these are things that are shorthand ways to describe something. Well, that's what's happened most of the time with the way we talk about heaven. And I'm gonna, without a pen, man, here's a better pen. I found one. Okay, so most of the time what we do when we talk about heaven is we use shorthand. It's like a way of condensing things, and we say one word. Oh, look at that, heaven. But really, we mean, the Christian tradition teaches this two-stage reality of heaven. And I'll get into this with the scripture of it. Now, before I do, I'm going to use an illustration. And I actually did this one time, and my kids acted it out. So I want you to imagine, see, I'm in Tampa, Florida. That's where I live, if anybody's watching this, in Johnson City. I'm in Tampa, Florida, and we have a shelter here. And that shelter is our, for single men and women. It's kind of, some people, you would probably not want to be there. Okay, let's imagine that you were at this shelter. You lived in this shelter, and there you are. Smiley face, okay. So there you are at that shelter, and then somebody comes to you and they present to you official documents saying that you have actually just inherited an amazing estate, like all kinds of money, and actually you have a place here in, let's say, San Diego. I don't really write in here. I don't write very often. In San Diego, and it's overlooking the ocean, and it's this glorious house. Your friends, your family are there. You'll have a place, you'll have a job, you'll have everything you've ever longed for. It's in San Diego, and with your this proclamation, this information that comes to you by courier that you are going to San Diego, you also have a plane ticket. And on that plane ticket, you are on your way to San Diego. Now, here's the little trick. You're leaving the Salvation Army homeless shelter, but the thing is, like, you actually stop in Dallas on the plane. So let's just imagine you have a plane I don't know. So it's like it looks like a person flying. Okay, you fly to Dallas. You have to stop in Dallas, because when you get to Dallas, just keep the illustration going with me for a second. When you stop in Dallas, all of a sudden you realize you have to pick up some other family members. And when you're there, eventually, then you get going to San Diego. Now let's think about this. So if you stop in Dallas, now let's just imagine you're back here, and you just got this estate. You just got word that you're going to have all this stuff. And you found that out, and you had the plane ticket in front of you. And then somebody at the shelter next to you says, so where are you going? Would you say, I'm going to Dallas? Or would you say, you're going to San Diego? You probably would say, I'm going to San Diego. I'm going to inherit this estate. Everything's headed my way. This is going to be amazing. Now, this is one way for us to think about eternal realities. Now, what is often referred to in the Christian tradition, like in Christian theology, refers to the two-stage reality of heaven. A lot of times we just refer to it as one, but really what happens is we condense these two things. Now, one thing about being in Dallas is while you're there, it's much nicer than the homeless shelter. Actually, even the plane ride to Dallas is nicer, but the ultimate journey is to San Diego. Now, here's what happens. The ultimate picture of what Bethany was showing me, most of the book of Revelation is talking about the final, ultimate, let's just call it the eternal state. And I'll send this to you in a PowerPoint too. Maybe it'll be easier. I have it over here, but I didn't have time to figure out. And then intermediate state. Now this is all kind of affirmed in Scripture too, and particularly because you're studying Philippians, I think this would be helpful. So the eternal state is what we most of the time refer to of the eternal reality. Now, one thing, what we'd say of this is a new heaven and a new earth. A lot of times what we think of is heaven as us going somewhere, going to be with God. But really the picture from Scripture, and I just move my stand, but really the picture from Scripture is of God coming to be with us, that there will be a new heaven and a new earth. Our world is is entirely resurrected, and that comes at the end of time. So, for instance, Revelation 21:3 says, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will be with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be their God. So we think of this, we move through this kind of shorthand, and I want to think through these few phases. So some of what you heard, like maybe you saw it in Philippians in chapter 1, that's right, you're studying. For instance, 1:22 and 24 says, if I am to go on living in the body, this will mean fruitful labor for me. Yet what shall I choose? I do not know. I am torn between the two. I desire to depart to be with Christ, which is better by far, but it is more necessary for you that I remain in the body. This is referring to this intermediate state. So you have like this passage there. I'm gonna call it something else, and I got this from Dr. Steve Tsoukalos. I'm gonna call it, and I didn't call it this, Heaven Level 1. So we even get from that passage that Paul's saying, look, this would be better. I would rather be there, even though if I stay here, I can be more fruitful for the gospel. This is a good place. And then in 2 Corinthians 5:8, I know Captain Bethany referred to this too. Paul says that this is a key line, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So Jesus ascended after he was resurrected. He ascended to the right hand of the Father, and we celebrate that, and the church celebrates that next week on Ascension Sunday. When that happens, we believe that Jesus still has a body, and that's hard to understand. Now, we won't have a body. We would say, like, we understand that to be absent from the body, meaning that we are people of body and soul. So our body is made up of kind of two entities, constituted by two entities, body and soul. If that's the case, our bodies stay here. Hence, when somebody dies, we know that their bodies have gone to the grave, but their soul is with Jesus. The absent from the body is present with the Lord. Now, here's the hard thing, is that this reality does not have much clarity from Scripture. There's just a couple of verses that talk about this, and you can go back and listen to a podcast that I had with Dr. Ben Witherington from Asbury Theological Seminary, where he talks about it. Really, most of the pictures of heaven are of this state, the eternal state, the San Diego sky. Now, if this illustration were perfect, actually, the idea is you go from Tampa, you go to Dallas, but actually the better picture would be you come back to Tampa, where you have the homeless shelter is now your mansion, this beautiful place where you can imagine like everything you've ever longed for is there. And that's the picture I want people to think of. This is what Scripture talks about, whether it be no more tears, no more crying, no more pain. This is where like time doesn't exist in the same way. There's no sin. This is the reality that we long for. So normally we're talking about that. We're talking about that, but not necessarily where people go when they die. So the idea is, in general, the intermediate state is where our loved ones are, where my grandfathers are right now. This is a good place. And I don't want that ever to be seen as something that is like not good. Oh, you mean they're not in heaven? There's a way that they're just waiting for Jesus to return. And this is kind of like, let's see, make sure I get this in here. Jesus, so what brings this about? So we have like kind of, another way to, let me give this another title. Present heaven is what Randy Alcorn calls it. So present heaven is there. And if we have present heaven, another way to think of it is sometimes this is even referred to, let's see, I have this listed here. It's also a place of particular judgment. So there's a present heaven, there's also kind of a present hell where we're not with Jesus, right? And that particular judgment. So there's a heaven level 1 and heaven level 1, heaven level 2. So this would be, level 2. Let me see, I think I have these written out here. But the bigger picture is it's the new creation, new heaven, and new earth. And so this all comes about like if the present heaven is where our loved ones are now, then when Jesus returns, and then after Jesus returns, there will be a resurrection. And so this is where established army doctrines come into play. So we have the resurrection, Jesus returned, the resurrection. Then we have general judgment at the end of the world. And then there is I'm going to skip a lot, then eternal. Heaven and hell. Okay, I know you might not be able to read my writing. It might help me just a little bit. I'll send you my PowerPoint, which is a lot clearer. So it just gives me something to point toward. So we have the resurrection of the body. Now this is something that often isn't taught in the church. And it's not because it's not believed. It's like maybe it's just not popular. It's not thought of enough. But when Jesus returns, all bodies will be resurrected. I mean, all the bodies in the ground right now, and even if people have been cremated, we trust that God, who created everything out of nothing, can reconstitute those bodies, and we'll have resurrected bodies. So Jesus, right now, where am I at? Resurrection. Okay, so Jesus will return, and Jesus' body, his resurrected body, and just think about some of the things that happen after resurrection. Jesus was able to walk through walls. He did like amazing thing. N.T. Wright calls it a trans-physical body. The whole point is like our bodies will be raised, right? And our souls and our bodies will come back together. If this is the first time you're hearing this, I know you're like, what on the earth is he talking about? But I think this is why probably like zombie movies exist, because there's kind of like something within us that wants to live again. This is why, and it also it's just going to be the world as it was meant to be lived. Our lives as they are meant to be lived. It's a glorious, beautiful thing that we long for. And all of the injustice that we experience in our world, racism, sexism, crime, will ultimately be restored at this new creation. So there's a general resurrection. So in the Salvation Army, we say this, and this is how this all fits in. We believe in the immortality of the soul. So we believe there's a reality that our soul exists. It hasn't always existed. It started when we were born, we were conceived in our mother's womb. We have a soul. We believe in the immortality of the soul, the resurrection of the body. That's based in Jesus' resurrection. So N.T. Wright says something interesting. He says that Jesus' resurrection is the model and means. So Jesus is the model and means of our resurrection. So Jesus will be raised like Jesus was raised. And Jesus then is the way that we experience this eternal resurrection. Another way to think of this is the second stage. Hopefully this is clear. If it's not, my PowerPoint will be a lot better. So this is life after death. Okay? We have life after death, but then what N.T. Wright calls this, we're not just looking for what's going to happen in life after death. We're actually looking for life after death. Okay. So I wish this, I'm sorry, like I look on this screen, it's like all this black, writing that's not very nice. So life after death, but really we're looking for life after death. So those two phases I think are critical. Let me see if I can pull up a few other ideas. Now there are places where Paul refers to those who have gone on as those who are asleep. And this gets more specifically to this question. Those who have gone ahead, who've already died, as being asleep. So this has led there be a small minority throughout Christian tradition that believes in something called soul sleep. And this sounds like what's being described. And it's not exactly unchristian. I'll just say that it's not affirmed by the broad scope of Christian teaching throughout the centuries. There's nothing exactly antithetical to it, to Christianity, to Christian message. But I just think like the few verses we have about this talk about the intermediate state being better, being a better reality. And we want to be there. Thinking that the Christian tradition has generally thought of this as a conscious reality. Something that we truly know in some function of our being. And that would be the same thing true with the reality of eternal judgment. That is something experienced. Now, what type of pain it is, what type of joy it is, it's hard to describe. We don't have much, but what we do have a lot on are all the things related to the eternal state. This like life after death. And we're told, like if you look in Philippians as well, chapter 3, verse 21, that he will transform our lowly bodies, how we experience them now, the decay, the frustration. Our bodies are kind of always almost to a state of dying, like moving toward that place. He will transform our lowly bodies so that they will be like his glorious body. So our bodies will be like his glorious body. So we sing at Easter, made like him we rise. Made like him we rise. We don't just live in some kind of spatial, weird state. Instead, it's better, it's touchable, it's feelable, it's tasteable. There's all sorts of wonderful things about what that will be. 1 Corinthians 15, so it will be with the resurrection of the dead. That's this state, the resurrection of the dead. The body that is sown perishable, it is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it's raised in power. It's sown in natural body, it's raised a spiritual body. And I think this even moves along to a place like, if you listen to this sermon series I had on this, which I just wanted to make sure to get to at least address in part the idea of soul sleep. This that's kind of like this side, present heaven. Like some people identify that as soul sleep. That during that phase, before Jesus returns, before the general resurrection at the end of the world, before any of that, before general judgment at the end of the world, that our souls are just asleep. So I'm not saying that's wrong. I just don't affirm that myself. But I don't think it's like not a Christian doctrine, because there are Christians who have believed that through the years. But I think as people are just trying to wrap their minds around this, that's what they end up getting to. I'll also add this is what we're all looking for. In the sermon series I have on this, I even talk about whether or not our dogs will be there. Okay, And I'm just going to let you listen to that if you can. There's a book by kind of the easy to read book by Randy Alcorn. It's really long, just called Heaven. N.T. Wright's book, Surprised by Hope, could be helpful on this too. And though sometimes he can be hard to understand, I'll just throw that out there. He kind of assumes a little bit more that you might know more than you assume more than I do. And I'll tell you, this isn't what I grew up understanding. I asked my parents, what's heaven gonna be like? I never felt like I got a really clear answer. Matthew 19:28 says, Jesus said to them, truly I tell you, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, the word there for renewal of all things is the word palingenesia. And that's like the word Genesis. You can kind of hear Genesia. Palin means again. And the whole point here is this is the restoration of all creation. So you have a renewal of creation. And if it's palingenesia, it's almost like regenesising. Regenesis, like Genesis again, like how God intended the world to be experienced before sin. That's ultimately what we're looking for. So again, I'm sorry, there's not a lot on the intermediate state, but there is a lot. I mean, all through in the Old Testament and Revelation, all sorts of great, wonderful pictures of what eternity will be like, and a lot of it, of course, is speculation. But I thought that might be helpful, and I kind of see some weaknesses in what I've said here already. So I hope this is helpful. I'm glad to talk to you all some more. And again, I just applaud you for thinking through it and being willing to wrestle with hard questions, particularly as core cadets who are thinking through that. And maybe we could set up a Zoom call or something where we could talk about this a little bit more. And I know one thing you asked about Sheol. Generally, that's kind of thought of as just an intermediate state, like where people, before Jesus died on the cross, before Jesus ascended to the right hand of the Father, there's kind of this general sense that there was this intermediate state, Sheol, Hades. Oh, another way to think of it is paradise. Jesus said on the cross, today you'll be with me in paradise. That's referring to that intermediate state. Now, in paradise, meant to sound like a nice place, a good place. Hades, Sheol, paradise, all referring to this middle area, still looking forward to the restoration of all things when Jesus returns and puts everything right. I'm looking forward to spending that eternity with you guys. God bless you.